Folks, welcome into this great series we put together for you. It's the 7 Financial Blind Spots. I'm Coach Pete with Marc Roethel with 5 Wealth Management. Marc, welcome in.
Pleasure to be here, Coach.
Yeah. Now, these are 7 of the blind spots we've identified, things people overlook or don't do quite like they should in the financial world. And this is a very important series because your financial plan needs to become your retirement plan. You need to have income for the rest of your life. We're going to talk about that later on here in the series, but the number one financial blind spot we've identified, and there's no particular order, but this one is a big one, is people don't have written goals. How important is that?
Well, it's extremely important. As the old saying goes, failing to plan is planning to fail.
Yep.
And we see this very often. You know, people are maybe saving money and so forth, but they don't have any written goals or plans.
Yep.
And they haven't thought that far ahead, just get too caught up in daily life and haven't really taken the time out to
Life
deal with
happens,
it.
doesn't it?
Life happens. Yep.
I just hit 51 the other day, so I know life moves a lot faster
Moves
than you
quicker
think.
than you think, for sure.
So, if you don't write something down, and I have a to-do list, you probably have a to-do list, and you do it over and over again, you still don't do everything you're supposed to do. Procrastination weighs into that. We'll talk about that later on. But when we talk about the financial world, should people really try to look forward and see what they're going to need goal-wise, what kind of money they're going to have put aside for retirement?
Absolutely. They need to plan for that because as we see, you know, people are living a long time,
Yep.
which is a good thing, but it also requires much more careful planning. And we can also rely a lot less on Social Security and pensions than we could in the past.
Tell me about it. Because really, when you talk about pensions, that's the dinosaur of the financial world. I mean, only 8% of folks, according to a recent study, have any form of pension at all from their company. And a pension, folks, by the way, is what we call a defined benefit program, where you basically work for a company for a certain number of years, and they say if you do that, we'll give you a certain paycheck for the rest of your life. Really good deal if you can find one.
Yeah.
Not too many out there, though.
Yeah, and statistically, they're a thing of the past.
Yep.
I don't think they're really creating any new ones that I'm aware of.
Yep.
So
we've moved over to defined contribution plans where you're in charge of putting money away for your retirement. And let's look forward. If someone is, let's say, 60 years old, and they've put money aside all the years, maybe they've done the right thing, and maybe they even have a pension put aside, but maybe they've switched companies and now they have a 401k. What kind of written goal would you advise for them as far as just looking? Should they write down everything they want to do in retirement on a sheet, or what should they do?
what they really need to do first is, first of all, figure out what they actually want to do in retirement. That's
Right.
what the end goal is, right?
Yep.
Where the rubber hits the road, and come up with a plan that will provide enough guaranteed income
Yep.
to accomplish that, taking into account inflation and all the other factors that go into that. But having a written plan to begin with is the first key step, and then of course we can adjust it from there as life happens.
If you fail to plan, you plan to fail is what they always say, right?
That's right.
So folks,
Absolutely.
get started. Don't procrastinate. Get a written goal and written plan put together. And if you need some help, I'm sure Marc and his team can help you with that.
At your service.
Yeah. When we come back, I'm going to talk about something here. We're going to talk about something called government pensions and programs. I'm from the government. I'm here to help. Should people depend just on the government, or should they do things that will help counteract anything that may change in the government's plans? We'll be right back. Folks, welcome back to the 7 Financial Blind Spots. We're going to hit number 2 right now, and this is one that, hey, it's great to have government programs around, government there to help you, but you can't depend solely on the government. You know, and Ed, there's an old saying there, we say, I'm from the government and I'm here to help. You don't want to hear that sometimes, right?
It gets us spooked just a little bit.
So what would you tell the person out there who is just saying, well, I don't need to save it all. The government's going to take care of me. I've got Social Security, and that's what I'm going to live on in retirement. Is that a good plan?
Well, we all know we can count on the government for a lot of things.
Yep.
But the thing we can count on the most is change.
Mm-hmm.
They never stay the same. We flip-flop back and forth from administration to administration. And just like we saw a few years ago, we saw changes to the Social Security system.
Yep.
Needed to bail out the disability portion. And here we are today looking at more with the new president.
Yeah, so don't depend just on the government. Nothing wrong with having them as a safety net. We call it the floor. But in order to have a good retirement, what do people out there need to do? They need to save on their own, don't they?
Yeah, we need to put some savings away ourselves, and we need to carefully approach what we do with those savings so we make sure that we have income when it comes time.
When we talk about income and we talk about lump sums and balances we have in our pension plans, one of the things people don't realize is that pension, that lump sum, is going to have to be there for the rest of your life.
Correct. I mean, it's almost you almost need a translator.
Yeah.
You get this big amount of money, and then what do you do with it? Well, you try to figure out how to stretch it for the rest of your life.
So someone says, well, I'm fine, I've got a financial plan. And then you say, well, that's great. Inside your financial plan, what kind of income have you arranged to have in retirement? And I usually get blank stares when I ask
Exactly.
that.
Yep.
And so therefore, your financial plan is not a retirement plan unless it has income built in.
Yeah, really what we find is most folks have a savings plan.
Yep. Yeah.
And the transition there from a savings plan to a spending plan in retirement is key to our success.
So you look at the person who's just depending on Social Security, hadn't saved at all, to the person I met with the other day who had over $1 million saved for retirement, but they still didn't feel comfortable because that was a lump sum. They didn't have any income translation to that. I know you do a great job of translating the lump sum to income.
Yep, and the idea here is we want to generate multiple streams of income. So we have our Social Security income. If we're lucky enough to have a pension, wonderful. We're excited about that. But we also then need to look at our savings and how that translates to a long-term income, hopefully one that we don't ever outlive.
When you think of Mother Nature, one stream running into a body of water is a pond, a bunch of streams is a lake, and many, many streams is an ocean. Wouldn't you like an ocean of income in retirement?
An ocean of income sounds great to me, Coach.
Yep. Very, very important. When we come back, we're going to talk about in more detail. We talked about inflation, how that can affect your plan, and we're going to talk about how we can combat inflation and make sure we get on that right track to not worry about inflation as much as a lot of people are.
Sounds great.
That's the number 3 blind spot when we come right back. Folks, welcome back into the 7 financial blind spots. Now, we're going to talk about number 3 here, and this is a big one, Mark. This is inflation, and inflation is here. It's when your buying power shrinks as the years go on, and unfortunately, sometimes the products you buy shrink as the prices go up. That's called deflation, but we're going to talk about inflation here. How can people identify inflation, and how can they counteract that, and should they admit it exists to make sure they have a proper retirement plan in the future?
Well, I think to identify inflation, we have to look long term because it's one of those things that creeps up on us. Even if inflation rates seem low, like 2 or 3%, over time with compounding interest, that becomes very significant. You know, when I was a kid, used to go up to the convenience store, ride my bike up there, and I'd saved my $10 over the past 2 weeks. And that could get me a long way. I could buy a 32-ounce refill and a huge mug, a bunch of 10-cent candies. And I was pretty good at rationing my money, which may explain why I'm pretty conservative now. But nowadays, you know, it's a good thing I don't like candy as much as I used to because
expensive.
it can be very expensive.
Yep. Well, I remember back in the day, and I'm 51, so Christmas in the 70s, my grandparents would give us a $5 gift certificate book of McDonald's gift certificates. $5, $1, 5 $1 ones. And we'd take one of those $1 ones out and go down to McDonald's and get a full meal. My brothers and I would. So we had 5 meals in that $5 book. Nowadays, I don't even know if they do those anymore.
Those
They
are the
have
good
gift
old
cards
days,
now.
yeah.
But if you did, you'd have to take the whole book in, and you still would have to get some change out of the little bucket there to pay for one meal. And so there's nothing happy about that meal, is there?
Nope.
It's funny, but that's inflation right there. And then, of course, the candy bars were 10 cents when I was little, and now they're like, I don't know what they are. I don't eat as much candy as I used to either. Probably 80, 90 cents. Candy bars
least
smaller, too.
I think they're $1. They're $1 plus most places.
So when we're talking about retirement planning, we have to make sure to put aside money in addition to what we think to counteract inflation, or have more than one stream of income coming in the future to make sure that you have more buying power. And would you agree or disagree that putting all your money into someplace like a certificate of deposit, CD, at the bank, we call certificate of depreciation or disappointment now, that's not the best way to line up your money for retirement as far as what kind of interest rate environment we're in right now when you're underperforming inflation?
Absolutely, because even with a low inflation rate, with certificates of deposit and their rate of return currently is not going to keep up with that.
You're lucky to get about 1% in a CD,
Yeah.
and the long-term inflation rate's about 3. So 1 minus 3 is -2. You lose money safely, we call it. You're losing money safely because you ride by the bank. Your money's there safe. It's not at the whim of the market. but it's not gaining anything either. I know my aunts back in the day in the 70s would get 16% interest on their CDs, so they would never touch their principal. They would just live on the interest. Those days are gone for the most part now.
Yeah, and we always factor that into our planning. Whenever we're planning for people's income and retirement, we plan for inflation built into their plan. And we also plan for longevity, because another issue that is created is the fact that many people are living past the age of 90, and that makes inflation that much more impactful.
Sure does. All right, so another blind spot we're going to talk about coming up next is taxes, and it has a detrimental effect a lot of times on your long-term plans if you haven't planned for it. And just like inflation, it's a blind spot. We're going to talk about that. We'll come right back. Folks, welcome into the 7 financial blind spots. Now, number 4 is what we call a common enemy of everyone. Ed, I don't know anyone who doesn't complain about some form of taxes.
Never stops. If you're not paying taxes, it's because you're not making money.
I know. So would you rather complain about paying a lot of taxes because you're making a lot of money, or be happy you're not paying any taxes because you're not making any money?
It's a tough call.
Well, wouldn't it be great to make a good amount of money and pay less taxes than other people are?
Well, that's our goal. With our client, we hear a lot of advisors out there that tell their clients, you'll pay less in taxes when you retire. We sure hope that's not the case for our clients. We'd like them to have more money, and of course, then we have a tax problem.
Well, you'd rather pay more taxes if you're making more money.
Definitely.
And so the misconception is that when you get to retirement, you'll be in a lower tax bracket. But who knows? I mean, we could be in the government. We are in a historically low tax bracket age these days.
Quite low. I mean, we're just under 40%.
Yeah, could go higher.
Yep. And, you look at the national debt, we realize it probably is going to creep up. And what most folks don't realize is the federal income tax started in 1930. Okay. Any idea what that was at? I mean, we're pretty low there at 7%.
What was 7% when it
7%,
started?
nice and low. Okay, 5 years later, we were up over 70%. So we 10 times our federal income tax.
Which was a temporary tax, by the way.
Yeah.
Still temporary, I guess.
Here we are. Eventually they'll get rid of it, we hope, right? No, it's not the case. So we have to take care to plan for that.
Mm-hmm. So someone out there who is saying, well, my advisor says everything's fine, they really haven't considered taxes, I don't think, in that equation.
Yeah, taxes don't go away. And so the idea of just putting our head in the sand and hoping it gets better is not the case. We need to take a proactive approach.
Now, we look at people that are designing the proper plans for tax-free retirement. You have some tax-free options out there.
Yeah, and so you want to create that careful balance. We want to minimize taxes today, but we also want to look at the rest of our lives and how best to reduce that. And there's tools out there that allow us to do that.
Let's talk about the Roth IRA here in this section too, because a lot of people don't fully understand it, even though it's been out for years and years and years.
A great place for
I mean, it's been said that if you were a farmer and you were planting your seeds for the year, and you look into the vast distance and you see a dust cloud rising, and then it gets bigger and bigger, and you see 2 SUVs, black SUVs, they pull up in front of your farm, and they get out with all their sunglasses on. They're IRS agents. Some from Men in Black.
Yeah, Men in Black. Right?
And they say, hey, Ed, we're going to give you a choice. Either you can pay us tax on that little bag of seeds and we'll never come back again, or you can just tell us to leave today and not pay taxes, but we'll come back every year and tax you on the harvest. What would you do?
I would pay on the seeds.
Yeah, me too.
It makes sense.
Never have to see them again.
But we've done the exact opposite. We say,
Roth
well,
IRA.
I don't want to pay right now. Well, and so, if we use the Roth IRA, we can pay on the seeds and we enjoy the harvest tax-free. And it's not that we're going to necessarily increase our dollars, but what we increase is the amount of each dollar that's ours to spend.
That's right. And so it's immediate satisfaction, though, of not paying taxes that encourages people to do what's called tax deferral. And tax deferral isn't a magic trick. All it's saying is, hey, let me grow my money, and when I grow it, then I'm going to share it with you every single year.
And on top of that, we don't even require the government to tell us how much of that growth they're
You
going to
never
want.
know, right?
We wouldn't borrow from the bank, and the bank tell us, well, when you come back, we'll tell you what.
That's a variable rate, isn't it?
Yeah.
So the good thing about the Roth is what the tax rate is today. You can pay taxes on your terms and never pay them again.
Exactly.
And then have that retirement. You don't worry about someone showing up at your door and wanting half or a third or whatever. We don't know what the tax rate is on your gains.
Exactly.
So if you're looking, if you're watching this and you have let's say a 401k balance of $700,000, $800,000, $900,000, and you say, hey, I'm almost to $1 million. No, you're not. because you have to pay tax on every single penny.
Exactly. So
Yep.
come talk
Yep.
to us. We'll
Yep.
work with you strategically,
Makes a lot
not
of
only
sense.
with us, but with your tax professional to make sure that we can minimize those taxes in retirement.
Taxes are what they are, folks, but the next segment on mortgages, this is the most controversial one out there. It's a blind spot. Should you pay your house off early or should you not? It's about a 50-50 opinions on that.
It
So
is.
we'll go through that, and we'll show you the goods and bads of both of those sides when we come right back. Folks, welcome back to the 7 financial blind spots. And number 5, there's no right or wrong answer, folks. And you basically do what makes you feel right if you can justify it by what we call the Ben Franklin. And the Ben Franklin is when you take a yellow pad, you put a line down the center of the sheet, you put positives on one side and negatives on the other side, and your family situation, you see what makes sense the most. And paying off the mortgage early or not, Mark, that's what we're going to talk about. What do you think?
Well, it all depends on the situation. I
Yeah.
don't know if there's one wrong or right answer here, and people get really hot under the
They
collar
really
when
do.
this topic comes up.
Yeah.
We have a lot of people that say just go broke to pay off your mortgage. And,
That's real estate poor, they call it.
the real
You've got all your
estate
money
poor.
in real estate.
That's
Yeah.
right.
So with interest rates low like they are today, I don't think it makes sense to pay the mortgage off early because you basically have the bank on the hook to accepting a very small payment in today's dollars for 15 or 30 years into the future. Doesn't make sense to take all the money from your bank account or if you inherit money and pay the mortgage off just to make yourself feel good that you don't have a mortgage payment anymore.
Absolutely, especially if you're using all or most of your
Yeah.
retirement savings or savings in general to do so.
Because Murphy's Law is going to strike if you take all your money and put it in a place you can't get it back out of.
That's right.
Here's something people don't think about. When you give the money to the bank to pay the mortgage off, if you want them, you say, like a couple months later, you say, I changed my mind, give me my money back. You're not getting it back, are you?
That's right.
You have to borrow again. You have to fill out all the paperwork all over again, get another mortgage loan to get the money back out. So be very careful on that. One other thing people don't think about when they say, I'm not going to have a house payment anymore, is the fact that you just don't have to pay the bank anymore. You still have taxes, insurance, and upkeep. And I'm a homeowner, and I know every single year something breaks at my house.
Yeah, I think we're deceiving ourselves if we think that once we have our house paid off that our home costs are going to be low. Yeah. Home ownership can be very difficult. I just got done remodeling a home, and I can tell you right now it costs a lot more than you even think it does, and there's always surprises around the corner.
Yeah, and the longer you're in that house, of course, the more chance you have of paying it off, but the more things are going to break. My house is over 20 years old now. Believe me, things break.
Yeah,
HVAC, the windows, new windows.
Yeah, where's some wood to knock on here?
Oh, it's crazy, isn't it? So again, no right or wrong answer. If it makes you feel great and you meet with a planner and they can sign off saying, hey, even if you pay your house off early, you still have money to put aside for retirement and you have liquid money that'll help in any emergencies and everything's still fine, then it makes sense. If it's your last penny or dollar, doesn't make sense.
Yeah, and there are great ways to do so, to accelerate paying down your house without depleting your retirement account.
Yep. One of the things I do, which probably I shouldn't because I have a 2.99% interest rate on a 15-year loan, is I pay one extra payment a year, and I divide that over 12 months. So each month I'm sending 1/12 of an extra payment in with my mortgage payment to go to principal. And because of that, my 15-year mortgage is now a 12-year mortgage. Pretty good, right?
Yeah, and I believe the tables say that if you do that or make 1 or 2 extra payments, you can actually, nearly cut your duration of your loan in half.
Yeah. So I mean, so why not do that? I mean, it's paying the principal down. Money goes right to principal, and I'm not putting myself at financial risk by taking money out of my accounts, the other accounts, to pay the mortgage off completely at one time. So what makes you feel good is good, but I would advise meeting with a planner or a planning team to make sure that you get the right decisions made before you make them. All right. So the next step here is procrastination, and this is one of the biggest, I guess, hindrances in the financial blind spot. It gets in the way a lot of times, and we're going to go through some traits and characteristics of procrastination, and I guarantee you'll hear some of them for yourself. I do all the time when we talk about it. Be right back. Folks, welcome back into the 7 financial blind spots. Now, we're on number 6, and number 6 is a big one. It's procrastination. You know, how many times have you made plans to do something only to put them off? I mean, everyone has that to-do list, and Ed, I don't know about you, but I have a to-do list, and maybe half the things get done, and the rest get put on the next to-do list.
I used to do it with sticky notes, and all I found was just a nest of sticky
They're
notes.
all over the place,
Yep.
aren't they?
So now it
Yep.
stays on a notebook, and
Yep.
we just keep on working down the line.
Cross them off, and
Yeah,
hopefully...
and the ones I don't want to do is, I'll do that tomorrow.
When I don't do it, I circle them, and that's supposed to draw my attention
Yeah.
to it. And the ones I don't do are usually the ones I don't want to do.
Exactly.
So financial planning or putting money away from retirement, big procrastination subject.
Exactly.
Or meeting with an advisor.
Yeah, meeting with an
Yep.
advisor, sitting down, spending that time
Yep.
to go through where you're at and really having a reality check of where things are at. So we talk about this in our book, The 5 Money Myths. It's an Amazon bestseller. And the very first section is all about procrastination. So there's an interesting law that this British economist by the last name of Parkinson, not to be confused with the physical ailment.
Right.
But, Mr. Parkinson here, he comes up with this idea that groups, when they're given an assignment and they're given 3 weeks to take care of this assignment, will
Right.
inevitably take 2 weeks, 6 days, 18 hours, and 47 minutes.
Sounds like me in college. Wait till the last minute, right?
Have that same assignment and give
Yep.
them 48 hours to do it, and it's accomplished in that time.
Yep.
So we tend to do that in our own lives, and
Interesting.
this is extremely detrimental in our financial lives because we
Yes.
think, well, I'm going to retire, and that's off down the road, and I'll get to it when I get to it.
Yep.
Right now, I'm going to go see a movie. I'm going to go buy the new car. I'm not going to worry about the income that I need or how much I'm really saving.
Yep.
I'll do that later.
Yep.
And then at the last hour, we sneak in and try to take care of things.
So it's the worst thing you do in the financial world because the time value of money is so important.
Exactly. It
Yeah.
kills the ability for our interest to earn
Yeah.
interest.
Well, look at 2 twins, Johnny and Jimmy. All right, they're both born at the same time. Look, obviously, they're twins. Johnny decides to start saving $100 a month at age 15, and then he stops at age 22. Jimmy, after seeing his brother stop, says, well, I'm going to show him. I'm going to start right now. Keep in mind, Johnny saved from 15 to 22. Jimmy starts saving $100 a month from 22 all the way to age 65. At the end of that, when they reach 65, who do you think has more money in their account?
Well, now I'm confused. Which one was it, Jimmy or Johnny?
Johnny
that was-
started first. Yeah.
I'm going to go with Johnny.
Johnny has more money, even though Johnny only saved for 7 years and stopped because he had all that time, the time value of money.
Exactly.
Jimmy, again, started at 22 and went all the way to 65. Still didn't have as much as Johnny did.
Compound interest
Compound
is incredible,
interest.
isn't
Crazy,
it?
isn't it? So, you don't want to put it. Now, if Johnny, the guy who stopped at 22, would have been my client, we never would have stopped. I would have
Yeah,
told him to
keep
double
on
down.
going.
Yes, yeah.
Yep.
Why he stopped, I have no idea. Maybe so we could talk about him later on in this kind of
Exactly.
setting
Gives
like
us
this.
A case study.
But procrastination gets people in trouble. It really does. And so if you're sitting out there, you have too much risk and you should do something about it, but the market keeps going up. You say, well, I'm going to get to it tomorrow. Usually people do the exact worst thing at the exact worst time. Greed and fear are the 2 main enemies in the market, and both of those are caused by procrastination.
Exactly. So we'd counsel to just get started, even if it's just a little piece.
Yep.
Just have that initial consultation, that initial
Important.
review of where you're at.
Yep.
Then you can start from there.
So the blind spot number 7 ties in a little bit with this. It's what age should we retire at? Have we put that thought in our head about when we're going to retire, and how do we do it? We're going to talk about retirement age when we come right back. Folks, welcome back into the 7 financial blind spots. Now, this is number 7, and this is a big one because this is why we work. This is why we save money. It's coming up with retirement. When are we going to retire? What age? And Mark, how do people decide, number one, what's a good age to retire, but when they can afford to retire?
Oh, people are funny about this topic.
Yep.
We hear everything from, we'll ask people when they want to retire. We'll hear everything from yesterday to never and everywhere in between. So it's really a case-by-case scenario based on, number 1, how good your health is. Number 2, how much you love what you do.
Yep.
Number 3, how anxious you are to get on with the next step of life. So we just help people to navigate through that
When you
process.
think about it, it incorporates everything we talked about earlier on every other segment of this series here, because we have to figure out if we have our house paid off or what we're going to do in retirement. When we reach retirement, is our income going to go down or go up? my opinion is when I retire, I want my income to at least be the same, if not more, because every day's a weekend in retirement.
That's right.
So we have to make sure that we are on the right path. So what would you tell someone who is maybe somebody watching, they're both age 60 now, and they have no clue when they want to retire? Well, they always say yesterday, like you're talking about, but they have no clue if they have enough money to sustain their lifestyle all the way through retirement, which could be 30 or 40 years of unemployment.
Yeah, well, what we have to do is kind of sit down and put together a plan for them that shows, okay, you can reasonably retire at whatever age it is and have enough money to last as long as you both might live.
Yep.
And I say both because in many cases one spouse checks out of the game first and leaves the other one with a mess to clean up. So we want to make sure that second spouse is able to continue on with a fruitful retirement.
Usually it's the second spouse that suffers more than the first one because all the money and time and effort is spent on the first one with health issues, whatever, and they pass away, and maybe they didn't have life insurance put in place, they didn't have wealth transfer strategies, and now the person who's left has to, what we call, change zip codes, not in a good way either, move to a neighborhood they don't want to go to. And so what would you tell someone out there who wants to have a good retirement plan? What's the first step?
Well, the first step is to get organized, get things figured out as far as how much income you will need in retirement, which is one of the main things we help you to find out, and then put together a plan that gives you some guarantees to get there.
I always say your financial plan is not a retirement plan unless it has income built into it, guaranteed for life. Is that a true statement in your opinion?
Yeah, well, that's the number one thing you're going to need in retirement is income. So that's kind of where the rubber hits the road on that.
How many people watching right now don't have an income strategy, you think?
Probably over 90%.
No, and they have a lump sum, but it hasn't been translated to income. And I know you guys do a great job with that. Folks, if you want to have your own income and retirement plan analyzed, have the goal setting and everything financially related to your retirement while you're doing what you're doing, you really need to call Marc and his team right now at the number you see on the screen. Visit the website as well. You see that on the screen. And when they come in to visit, they get a copy of your great book too, don't they?
Absolutely. Of course.
Very good, folks. Take advantage of this. Share this series with as many people as you know who could use this education as well. But Marc, thanks for your time today.
Thank you, Coach. Appreciate it.
Welcome into this great series called 7 Financial Blind Spots. I'm Coach Pete, joined with Ed Kinsey from 5 Wealth Management. Ed, welcome in.
Thanks for having us, Coach.
Yeah. Now, I want to talk about these 7 spots that people are basically overlooking in their financial planning process. And folks, you may realize some of them, and some you may not be familiar with. So let's talk it through. Keep in mind, there's usually no right or wrong answer. It's what your opinion is, but it's great to get a second opinion from a qualified advisor as well. And I think Ed is the guy you need to talk to if you're going to do that. Ed, let's talk about one of the biggest blind spots is people don't have written goals. How important is that?
You know, that's a great topic. We see this all the time. I'm a sports fanatic. I love sports, and I'm sure you know who Evander Holyfield is.
Sure do.
So he goes in, and he's starting to train. His coach likes what he's seeing. He says, hey, you know, you could be the next Muhammad Ali. And he says, you want to do that?
I hear that all the time.
He says, well, let me go ask my mom first. Isn't that crazy that
really
Evander
did.
Holyfield needs to go talk to his mom first? So he comes back, tells the coach, yeah, I'm all in. He says, well, is that a dream or is that a goal? I said, what do you mean? He says, well, you know, a dream's something we think about, we fantasize about, doesn't usually happen.
Right.
A goal, we write down, we pursue, we go to work at, and we achieve.
So in the financial world, what would be some good written goals that people are forgetting to do these days?
Well, a lot of times we just take a casual approach. I'm putting something into my 401k because that's what I have at work, trying to build up a lump sum, and then we just kind of, well, let's see what happens.
Yeah. And that is a dream, basically, isn't it?
Exactly.
And so, especially these days, because pension planning is all up to you out there. There's no companies offering pensions hardly these days. You have a 401k or 403b or TSP, that's your pension. You need to make sure to treat it like that. So what if you could put your finger on one financial goal that people aren't doing, that they're not writing down correctly or not even thinking about, what would that be?
Well, a great place to start really is just in defining what you want as far as a monthly or annual retirement income.
Yeah.
You know,
And
if we put a hard number to it, then we can build backwards. We can build out how much we really need.
What about someone who says, well, I want a certain amount of money today, and I want that in retirement, you have to basically correct them after you write it down to help them factor in something called inflation too. Don't
Yes. People forget about inflation, the fact that our dollars shrink.
So if you don't write it down, you'll never get there.
So true.
Folks, written goals, very important. Ed can help you with a financial goal sheet and make sure you're on the right track and basically help you think about different things you haven't thought about. Ed, here's another thing we don't think about. We don't think that there's other programs out there but just government pensions and programs. When people retire, they start thinking about, well, the government's going to take care of me. And when we come back on Section 2, we're going to talk about how, well, government programs are good. They shouldn't be the only part of your retirement and financial plan.
Awesome. I'm excited to talk about it.
Folks, welcome back into the 7 financial blind spots. Now, number 2 is a big one because it is great to have a government that helps you out, but it isn't great to have the mentality where the government's going to take you all the way through and take care of you all the way. And so, Marc, what do you think about government programs? Should people depend on them completely, or should they have their own supplemental plans?
Well, they are nice to have, of course, but as we've seen in the past, just in recent years, in the Bipartisan Budget Act of 2015 already reduced Social Security.
Yep.
And I'm certainly not going to assume that there will not be similar reductions in the future.
That was a big one, by the way.
It was a huge one.
It really threw a lot of things into disarray when people had planned ahead of time and their plans were thrown out.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. And if you think that they won't continue to make similar reductions in the future, you have a lot more faith in the system than I do.
Well, politics. And the funny thing about that one was, you said bipartisan. So it was both parties took it upon themselves to basically leave people out to dry, and some of the people that had planned.
Yeah, we joke with people that come to our Social Security planning workshops that, we joke that they had a say in it and that they voted on that. And, of course, they didn't. So we get a lot of laughs out of that.
Yeah.
But
all right, so let's talk about some ways to plan without the government's help, or put some money aside on your own. What would you advise people do as far as looking at retirement, fast forwarding into retirement? What should people be putting aside now, and where should they be doing that to make sure that the government plans and programs are okay, but they can put themselves into financial orbit, a lot better orbit, by planning on their own?
Yeah, well, our main objective, of course, is security. Yep. So what we're looking at is guaranteed income, and there are personal type of pension plans that are available that are a lot more safe and secure, with a lot more guarantees built into them that can accomplish that for us.
Personal pension, very important, because a lot of the plans out there are group plans, and you don't really have any control in a group plan, do you?
That's absolutely correct.
So how easy is it to get a personal pension? I mean, let's say someone's out there, maybe they're 59 and a half, 60 years old, and they have 401ks put aside, but they really don't have any income. They have that balance, which is great to see a big balance, but you have to know there's some taxes that are going to be coming out. That balance is also, you don't have income designed for life. How important is it to get an income plan to go along with your 401k, or move tax-free your money from your 401k into your own income plan?
Well, having an income plan is extremely important because, as you mentioned, there's also market volatility that we have to take into account.
Yep. Which people forget about in an up market, don't they?
Oh, absolutely.
Really quick, people forget.
Yep.
A couple down weeks or a couple down months, and people remember really quick.
Yeah, we've dealt with many people, prior to 2008 that were planning to retire. And those people had to do one of two things. If their money was all at risk in the market, they either had to delay retirement or retire in a lot lesser of a situation that they had hoped for.
And that's not what anyone wants, right?
Absolutely.
So fear and greed get people into more trouble than you can imagine in the market world. There's a local company in my area in Raleigh, North Carolina, Cisco. They're also in San Francisco. They're all over the place. Cisco is the technology company. And in the early and late 90s, they were going like crazy. They were actually up to $86 a share in the year 2000. Now they're hovering around $30 a share. So they've never recovered. We're just 17, 18 years into it, and they still haven't recovered.
That's right.
So people that had planned to retire with Cisco as their main holding, they are, like you said, they're either going to retire in a much less kind of advantageous position money-wise, or they still haven't retired yet.
Yeah, and Coach, you're right. People forget. They forget what happened in 2008. We talked to a lot of people that have said, well, our money eventually recovered. But the problem is, not only did they lose that money, but it took a lot of time to get back up to where they were. So the time lost in many cases can be more significant than the money lost.
We call that financial amnesia, when people forget real quick what happened.
Absolutely.
Folks, when we come back, we're going to talk about one of the other enemies here when in retirement planning. It's something we have to identify, we have to admit is here. It's inflation. We'll talk about that when we come right back. Folks, welcome back into the 7 financial blind spots. We're on number 3 now, and this is a big one. This one can hurt you if you don't basically plan for it ahead of time. It's inflation. Now, Ed, have you seen it? How old are you?
I'm 36.
You've seen some inflation in your life then.
A little bit, yeah.
What did you pay for your first candy bar? You remember that?
I don't, but we used to go to the corner store there, and we'd get penny candy.
Penny candy,
So
yeah.
Mom would send us down there with $1, and we'd get a bag full of candy and a little IBC root beer.
You were happy
Loved it.
you were happy all
Life
week
was
with that,
great.
right?
Yep. Now my kid wants $10.
Yeah, that's about what it is. And they still don't get anywhere near what we used to get.
Yeah, or what we see a lot of times. I don't know what you paid for your first home.
Yeah.
I talked to a lot of my clients about what they paid for their first home, and you can't even buy a car for that now.
It's pretty funny. My dad paid $34,000 for his first home in 1974, and just last year bought a car for like $70,000. You can't live in the car,
You
but
can't live
gosh,
in the car
that's
and finding a
inflation.
house for $70,000 now is.
So look at inflation, and that's things getting more expensive, and then deflation. Deflation is when people shrink things on you, and so we look at candy bars have shrunk over the years in size. Well, they've gone up in price.
Yeah, or a bag of chips. You ever
Bag of
notice
chips.
you open the bag of chips and there's a lot of air in there, and
You have to
there's not
pop
a lot
it
of chips.
instead of open
Yeah.
it. Just pop the bag of chips, and then it goes from being a big bag to like a couple crumbs on the
Oh,
bottom.
it's so true.
Yep.
It's great for my waistline.
Well,
though.
I know.
get a little-
It's forced dieting.
Yeah.
Well, look at the half-gallon ice cream. Used to be able to go down to the store and buy a half-gallon ice cream. Now it's in ounces, and it's not a half-gallon
Yeah,
slice.
yep.
But the container is about the same size. They're pumping it full of air, sort of like potato chips.
Whipped
Yeah,
ice cream.
they whip
right?
it up. They whip it up, and then basically, again, it's good for your waistline, bad for your wallet.
Exactly. Exactly.
All right, so someone's out there. They are 60 years old, and they're saying, well, I don't need to worry about inflation anymore because I'm almost retired. Is that a true or false statement?
Definitely a false statement. What we find that tends to compound this issue is that folks, as they age, they get closer to retirement, they realize I need to be a little more conservative, a little more safe with my investments. And what we find a lot of folks doing is we find them going broke safely.
Yeah.
As the value of that dollar shrinks over time, if they're not making it enough to outpace inflation, right? They're losing money.
Especially if they put their money in a CD at the bank because they're tired of the risk of the stock market. So they go to the
yeah.
CD, and we call it certificate of disappointment, CD, or certificate of depreciation.
Yeah.
It's not good. But they don't want to lose money. But then they are losing money safely because if you get a 1% rate on the CD and inflation's 3% historically, that's 1 minus 3 is -2.
Negative
So you have
two, so
-2 buying power each year, which really adds up.
Yeah, so we really, we would like to be able to spend our money. We'd like to keep that dollar growing enough to at least keep up with inflation.
Yep.
And what we're really good at 5 Wealth Management is exactly that. We teach people how to safely grow their assets.
So the best solution would be to give you a call, I guess, to go over that, and not try to do it themselves.
That'd be great.
Yeah. I know a guy who once tried to change his own oil, forgot to put the oil back in. Rest is history, right?
Yep, he saved a lot of money there, didn't he?
Save money, changes his own oil.
And-
It cost him like a couple grand for a new engine.
Exactly.
So, folks, inflation is here. Let's not ignore it. The worst thing someone can do is say, hey, it's not bothering me or it's not affecting me. Yes, it is. I mean, slowly over time, it really adds up. And when the government does their inflation numbers, they rule out fuel and food, and they look at washing machines and cars. You don't buy washing machines and cars every day.
Like you say, the last time
Yeah.
I bought a washing machine was prior to my last scoop of ice cream.
Yeah. Oh, see, well, that's a long time ago then, probably.
Yeah.
Okay. So inflation's an enemy, as is taxes. And when we come back on the financial blind spots, number 4 is taxes. We're going to talk about ways to combat that, ways to identify it. Number 1, if you're overpaying in taxes, and do that tax analysis that everyone should do. We'll be right back. Folks, welcome back to the 7 Financial Blind Spots. Now, this is a big one here. This is number 4, and this is taxes. Taxes do have a big part of a financial plan. We have to account for taxes. We have to account not only what they are today, but we have to look what the taxes could do to our retirement portfolio in the future. Marc, what do you think about taxes?
I hate them.
Me too.
Yeah, taxes are one of the few things that we can depend on in life.
They're going to be here.
What is
Death
the old
and
saying?
taxes.
Death and taxes are the 2 guarantees.
Yep.
So yeah, taxes are definitely something to be considered, not just now, but more importantly in the future.
Right. And so when we're doing a long-term plan, you have to account for taxes because they're going to be here, right? And so what would you say to the person who says, well, my planner says that when I retire, I'm going to be in a lower tax bracket, so I don't need as much income?
Well, there's a lot of assumptions in that, and the main one is that taxes will not change and that the brackets will not change. But one thing that we can depend on with government is that it will constantly change, and that those changes will not necessarily be predictable.
Yep.
So we're leaving a lot to chance by taking that approach.
The only thing that seems to change faster than the clothing styles that exist today are taxes, tax rates.
Yeah, don't get me
and
started
tax
on the
opinions.
clothing styles.
They change all the time, don't they? So, all right, so we look at taxes, we look forward, and we're trying to build a retirement plan, and we look at our 401k balances because a lot of people have 401ks or 403bs or TSB, thrift savings plan. But we have a lump sum there, but we forget a lot of times when we're looking at that lump sum that we have to share that whole lump sum or a portion of that. We have to account for that lump sum with who? The government, right?
That's right.
Our friend in the back. So what should we do if we're worried about how much we're going to have to share with Uncle Sam?
Well, we should be worried about it, first of all, because our partner in business with that 401k is Uncle Sam. And what we need to be worried about is how much will we be paying in taxes, because we don't know. So we have to plan for a balance. So what we really promote is a balanced tax approach in which we have a tax-free stream of income to balance out what we pay in taxes.
Yeah, I've had to break the news to people when they've come in and they say, I'm a millionaire. I've just hit $1 million in my 401k. And so, well, you're really not a millionaire. Here's why. About a $700,000 there, because about 30% of that money is going away in taxes. So we need to make sure just to account for it and admit it exists and learn about the Roth IRA, ways that you can pay taxes right now today and then have that money grow forever tax-free. Very important when you get to retirement, not having to share your income accounts with the government.
Yep. What we emphasize is that where the rubber hits the road is how much money do we actually have to spend, not how much is actually in the account, a portion of which, of course, is not ours.
Makes you happy to see the balance, but it makes you sad, really sad, when you realize it's not all yours.
Yep.
When we come back, we're going to talk about the most controversial of all the 7 blind spots, mortgages. Should you pay that house off or not? We're going to go through the good, bad, and the ugly of both sides when we come right back. Folks, welcome back into the 7 financial blind spots. Now, number 5 is something that it gets people's blood pressure up. It really does.
We get a little bit of controversy
you get all
going on
fired
here.
up. So you have something you call your home. If you don't call it your home, if you call it a house, it's probably not where you should be.
Exactly.
Once you move in, your house becomes a home and it becomes yours. And the big thing is, Ed, should we pay that house off as fast as we can, or should we keep the mortgage broker on the line for 15 or 30 years?
It's a tough call, Coach. Everybody has differing opinions on this.
Now, we're in a low interest rate environment, right?
Yep.
So if you can lock in the bank to accepting a payment, you know what it's going to be for 15 or 30 years, and you don't have to come up with any more money than that. There's no balloon on there or whatever. Why wouldn't you want to do that?
Yeah, we love the idea in a low interest rate environment of taking advantage of the bank.
Yep.
You run into difficulties if you don't. If you make those extra payments, the bank doesn't say in a rough month or in a rough
They don't
year.
care.
They say, well, next payment's due.
It's what you've done for me lately. Nothing.
Exactly. And worse than that, if you need money, well, guess what? You have to go requalify for them to give you your money back.
All right, so someone's watching now. They just inherited. We see this a lot too. They just inherited $300,000.
Okay.
They owe $200,000 on their mortgage.
Okay.
They really haven't funded retirement like they should have, but they want to get that house paid off because they've told themselves, hey, if I pay my house off, I have no more bills with the house. Number one, if you pay your mortgage off, is it a true or a false statement that you don't have any more bills for the house?
Home ownership has its expenses.
Yes.
Regardless of if we have a mortgage or
Property
not.
taxes.
Yeah, property taxes are in there. There's always
Insurance.
home repairs. We've got to insure against that.
Yeah.
And now instead of insuring the bank's money, we're insuring our own.
Yep.
That spooks me just a little bit.
So we see it a lot, and the decision is, well, I'm going to take this $200,000 where I should probably put it in my retirement account, or and then you have that money put aside, and then have another $100,000 for liquidity if you inherit $300,000. But people are so quick to pay that house off, they don't realize that there are a lot more bills with a house too.
Well, and I think the intention is good. The conservative nature, the conservative use of that inheritance is a wonderful thought.
Yeah.
But what we want to realize is there are tools out there that can safely outpace inflation.
Yep.
Okay, we can insulate against market risk and things like that, and get growth in excess of what we would pay in interest on that mortgage.
My opinion, and everyone's opinion is different, right? They're like elbows. Everyone has two of them. Most people have two elbows. Some people are double jointed. They have
I've
four
got
elbows,
two. We're
right?
good.
My wife's double jointed. She can move her elbows back and forth. She's probably four elbows. But, most people would say that, if we're in a 6% interest rate environment or lower, as far as mortgage rates, this makes no sense to pay the house off early.
I think that's a great rule of thumb. Again, everybody's scenario is going to be a little bit different, but I think that's a great rule of thumb.
When we come back, we're going to talk about the biggest enemy out there in all financial planning. It's procrastination. We'll get to it tomorrow instead of today. We're going to talk about how that's a big hindrance when we're talking about financial planning and retirement planning. We'll come right back. Folks, welcome back into the 7 financial blind spots. Now, this is a big one. Number 6, procrastination. So many people have the best plans laid out, but they put them off to tomorrow or the next day, and it never happens. Mark, how important is it to eliminate procrastination from your planning process?
Well, first of all, guilty as charged
Me too.
in many aspects of my life, I have to confess. But yeah, procrastination when it comes to retirement planning, it's amazing how many people we come across that say, well, I've decided to delay retirement a few years, so I don't need to address this for a while. I'll address this once I'm within a year or two of retirement. Obviously, that's completely the wrong approach, and they're going to end up further down a road they don't want to be on, and it'll be more difficult to
Do you think people
turn back.
procrastinate because they are afraid of making decisions, or they are just afraid of looking at what's going on now? They don't want to see the inevitable, or why do people procrastinate, especially financially?
I just think that it's one of those things that people feel uncomfortable in dealing with, and they don't know how to get started.
Yep.
Just like anything else in life, getting started on the right path is usually the most difficult step.
I know your firm, you have a way to help people identify procrastination. You have to identify it first, and you have ways to overcome it. But they have to sit down and talk to you about that.
Yeah, we try to identify it in a nice way, and usually people will identify it within themselves. We don't have to point anything out. So
We all know.
it's just getting over denial is the first stage, right?
Denial is not just a river in Egypt, they used to say, right?
That's right.
Well, all right, so procrastination, it's there. We admit it's there. So what are a couple of the easy steps you could recommend people take to counteract procrastination as it exists in the financial world?
Well, the first thing they need to do is just get assertive about sitting down and looking things over, getting it all together and organized, and then sit down with somebody like us that can help you to at least provide you with the tools to make the right decisions.
A lot of times it's one of the people in a couple, so it's not both of the people. One person is a go-getter and they're ready to go, but the other person puts things off, and then it becomes a battle. What would you recommend if it's a spouse and they're watching it together and they're saying, "Hey, honey, you're the one procrastinating," whatever? How do you get them on the same path?
Well, I think you have to kind of get them both engaged in the process. I think if one of them feels left out of the process, then they're not going to want to deal with it, and it will continue to get procrastinated. But if both of them are involved, both of them have their input, and it's a case-by-case scenario because some couples just want one of them to take care of it. Others want to both be involved. So
I see people procrastinating when to even start saving, which the sooner the better, but also procrastinating when they are coming up with their target retirement age. And these are both important issues when we talk about the financial world. People who start saving earlier have more money, and people who have a real plan in place about when they're going to reach retirement really strive to meet those goals. It's
Well,
goal setting.
and I've seen statistics that show how many of those people that plan to retire at a certain age don't end up even getting to that point because of health and other issues that come up.
Yeah, you're right. But having the right plan in place is very important.
Yep.
Yep. When we come back, we're going to talk about the retirement age. How do you arrive at what age you're going to retire, and how do you overlook that too? We're going to talk about retirement age when we come right back. Folks, welcome back to the 7 Financial Blind Spots. And this is the last one, and this is the big one. And this is one that we all have thought about. What age are we going to retire? And Ed, it's not what age are we going to retire, but what age can we afford to retire, or are we going to retire at all?
Yeah.
It's different for everybody, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I'm still in my 30s,
Yep.
so I look at it and say I'm never going to retire.
Yeah.
I love
Yeah.
what I do. I love working with folks.
It's
and,
fun, right?
And there with them. Yeah, but eventually I know I'm going to turn the corner. I'm going to want to retire. I think it's important that we retire on our own terms.
Yeah. So that's the big thing about retirement. The people who retire on their own terms are a lot happier than the ones that were either forced out or maybe a spouse told them they needed to or whatever.
Yeah. Yep.
Just think about it. When you retire, you're leaving not only your job, but you're leaving your work family. And studies have shown that you spend more time and have more intimate moments, not behind closed doors, but just conversations with your employees than you do with your real family.
Yeah, and
Work family.
one of the problems we find with this is folks sit here and they fret over, well, when should I retire? Am I going to be able to retire? We love to talk about the fact that once we retire, we have 6 Saturdays.
Yep.
And
Every day's a weekend.
Every day's a weekend. We take the Sabbath off, right?
Yep.
Then away we go.
Yep.
And so with nothing else to do but spend money, we tend to spend it. So it's important that we
So you have to have money to spend.
Yeah, it's important that we plan ahead,
Yep.
that we figure out how much we have and what we're dealing with, so that we can comfortably retire. So we can pick that retirement age.
This ties in every single one of the previous blind spots, retirement age. So we have to know if we have enough money. We have to have written goals. We have to have an income plan put in place,
Yep.
hopefully with more streams of income than one. Social Security, yeah, that's one, but we don't plan for that. We say, well, what if it went away? Let's make sure you're still fine. And let's make sure that we have the money that we've put aside for retirement in the correct spaces, isolated from risk, fees, expenses, and taxes as much as possible.
Exactly.
That's
Yeah,
very
I was going to
important.
point that out, that
Yep.
we want to make sure that our risks are reduced.
Yeah.
We plan for that. And one of those risks that a lot of us forget about is the risk of taxation,
Yep.
which direction it's going to go. And of course, everybody forgets about inflation because it just quietly eats away at our money.
Let's dig into your mind and see if this is just a spur of the moment thing. But think
Okay.
of someone you've met with in the last couple of years or whenever who told you they were ready to retire or wanted to retire, and you had to give them the news where they really need to get their plan in order before they even thought about that.
Well, it's interesting you bring that up. I just met with a couple this last week, and we had that initial visit, that initial consultation, and that's the conversation that will be had in the next the next consultation. Is
Yep.
just exactly that. They're nowhere near where they need to be.
Yep.
And so it'd be a tough call, tough discussion.
See a lot
to
of
have.
people like that here too. They're ready to retire. They want $100,000 a year in retirement, yet they only have about $100,000 saved for retirement.
Yep.
It's just not possible.
Yeah, we just
don't have a magic wand.
We're good at what we do, Coach.
Not that good.
But yeah.
So it's, again, planning early, getting the right plan, and being realistic in your goals.
Yep.
And having written goals to begin with. Not having things written down is a recipe for disaster a lot of times.
Yeah, so I think if you're in that scenario where you're trying to figure out where you're at when you want to retire, or if you're prepared to retire when you want to, it's a good time to get in and talk with us.
So you'll do all these 7 financial blind spots. You'll go through these with anyone who's watching. If they call the number on the screen or visit your website, you'll make sure they get these isolated, identified, and put in the right place.
Definitely, and if they mention that they saw us here, we'll do that free of charge. Happy to visit with
Can
them.
they get a copy of your book when they come in?
Oh, for sure.
Come in and get a copy of the book, but get an education and a team you can be proud of. Ed, thanks for your time.
Hey, thank you, Coach. Appreciate it.